I am glad to welcome you to my channel Sinister Horror Stories. Before we start the story, I would like to ask you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. It was the kind of night that seemed too quiet. Mark Lawson had been working the graveyard shift at the gas station off Route 6 for nearly 2 years, and he knew that stretch of highway better than he knew his own backyard. He had seen all kinds of things: drifters, truckers on long hauls, even the occasional police cruiser stopping in for a quick cup of coffee. But that night, something felt off, like the air itself was holding its breath. Mark wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand as he leaned against the counter. The small TV behind him droned on about some late-night talk show he wasn't paying attention to. Outside, the only light came from the flickering neon sign that read, "Open 24 hours," and the single street lamp at the edge of the lot. The highway beyond was a ribbon of darkness, stretching into nothingness. He glanced at the clock, 3:07 a.m. The dead hour, he thought. The time when things could happen, and no one would be around to see. His eyes drifted back to the door, half expecting someone to walk in. No one did. Then, as if summoned by his unease, headlights appeared in the distance. They were faint at first, barely more than a glimmer on the horizon, but they grew brighter as the vehicle approached. Mark straightened up, his hand instinctively reaching for the .38 revolver tucked under the counter. You never knew what kind of trouble could roll in at this hour. The car pulled into the lot, its engine rumbling low like a beast growling in the dark. It was an old, battered sedan, the kind you don't see much anymore. The paint was chipped and faded, and one of the headlights was out, leaving the car with a half-blind stare. It idled in front of the pumps, but no one got out. Mark waited. Maybe it was just someone looking for directions who had lost his way. He could deal with that. He could deal with most things. But the seconds ticked by, and still the driver didn't move. The car just sat there, engine purring softly like it had all the time in the world. "Come on, man," Mark muttered under his breath, his fingers tightening around the handle of the gun. "What the hell are you waiting for?" Finally, the driver's door creaked open. A man stepped out, tall and gaunt, his clothes hanging off him like they didn't quite fit. He wore a black coat that looked too heavy for the mild September night, and his face was shadowed under a wide-brimmed hat. Mark watched as the man walked slowly toward the station, his footsteps oddly muffled against the cracked asphalt. The bell above the door jingled as he pushed it open, and the man stepped inside, bringing with him a rush of cold air that sent a shiver down Mark's spine. "Evening," the man said, his voice low and gravelly like he hadn't used it in a while. "Evening?" Mark replied, trying to keep his tone casual. "What can I do for you?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the small store, his eyes lingering on the shelves stocked with snacks and motor oil. Then, without warning, he turned those eyes on Mark, eyes that were a little too dark, a little too deep. "I need gas," the man finally said. "But I don't have any money." Mark frowned. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you with that. Station policy." The man's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile, or maybe a sneer. "That's too no good," he said softly. "But you will help me." The words hung in the air, heavy with something Mark couldn't quite put his finger on. He felt a prickling at the back of his neck, a sense of wrongness that he couldn't shake. "Look, buddy," Mark said, his voice a little sharper now. "I don't know what you think." "You'll help me," the man repeated, cutting him off. "Because if you don't, something no good is going to happen. Something real no good." Mark's hand went to the revolver, pulling it out and holding it at his side. "I think you should leave," he said, his voice steady despite the fear creeping up his spine. The man didn't move, didn't even flinch at the sight of the gun. Instead, he leaned in closer, and Mark could see his face clearly now, pale, almost sickly, with eyes that seemed to go on forever. "You ever hear about the shadow people?" the man whispered. "They're the ones who come for you in the dead of night, when you're all alone. They slip in through the cracks, through the spaces you don't even know are there. They take you, and no one ever sees you again. No one even remembers you existed." Mark swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. "Get out," he said, his voice trembling. The man smiled again, wider this time, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too white. "They're already here," he said, "and they're coming for you." The lights flickered then, just for a moment, but long enough for Mark to feel his heart skip a beat. When they steadied, the man was gone, and the door was swinging shut. Mark stood there, the gun still in his hand, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked around the empty station, his eyes darting to every shadow, every corner where something might be hiding. But there was nothing, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of the neon sign outside. He stepped to the door and peered out into the lot. The sedan was still there, but the driver's seat was empty. The car's engine was off, the night silent except for the faint chirping of crickets. Mark backed away from the door, his mind racing. He reached for the phone, intending to ask the police, but when he lifted the receiver, there was only dead air. He slammed it down, panic rising in his throat. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something move. A shadow that shouldn't have been there, slipping across the floor toward him. He turned, but there was nothing. Just the empty store, the rows of snacks, and the darkened windows. But the shadow was still there, hovering just out of sight, just beyond the edge of the light. He could feel it, could feel the cold breath of something ancient and hungry on the back of his neck. Mark backed up, his hand shaking as he raised the revolver. He pointed it at the shadows, at the nothingness that surrounded him. Then, the lights went out. The last thing Mark heard was the soft, rustling whisper of something moving in the dark, something that had finally found him. Thank you for listening to the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Share your impressions in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.